and we are live for another episode of Leadership and Legal. James, thanks for coming back again today.
Thanks for having me. These are the most controversial questions I've seen yet.
We're going to get there in a second. So there's a couple of things going on this morning. You could see our third seat is actually not filled. And we've been marketing all the last couple of weeks that Terry Bean is going to be on, Terry Bean is going to be on. Terry Bean had every intention to be on, but actually didn't realize until just about 2 minutes ago when I got a pretty interesting email from him saying, crap, I didn't realize I was supposed to be in our offices here at Qualigen, socially distanced, of course. So he's probably not going to make it. So we're hoping that we get some feedback from him on some of the questions that we have. And we'll make sure to get Terry on the next episode,
Absolutely.
which we'll do next week, because I'd love to get Terry's thoughts on some of these, because week after week after month that we do these, the questions are getting a little more interesting.
I think people are getting more comfortable.
Yeah.
And for those of you that don't know him by Terry Bean, I hear Terry Berry is another popular name of his.
That's right. That's
okay.
right.
Okay.
So we've got a lot to cover, a lot of great topics. So just so everybody knows, if this is your first time joining us, welcome. James and I do this basically every single month. We go live for 40 minutes to an hour. And the purpose of this is to really address your questions regarding anything legal or leadership when it comes from an HR perspective. Because people are legal issues, people are people issues, there's all kinds of issues. This is really focused towards heads of HR, CHROs, but talent acquisition has been on, all kinds of questions related to that. There's even been some business leaders on, which is fine as well. So if you've got a question or a comment that you want James or I to address today or on future sessions, I'm monitoring our LinkedIn live feed. David, my camera guy, is taking a look at our Zoom feed. Or you can text me directly at 734-837-8500, and we'll try to work it in.
And I'm also monitoring myself.
Yes.
It's purely
Give your
legal.
number out.
734-649-1313. The questions will be confidential. We won't reveal your name.
Yes.
And we look forward to having in-person events so people are more comfortable sharing their questions without any evidence in writing.
Yeah, we're keeping this 100% anonymous. So unless you say, use my name, we will not use your name,
Right.
And we'll get rid of it. And the idea here is not to be overly formal about anything we talk about. It's kind of like two guys, one with a legal background, one with more of an HR and leadership background, addressing some of these issues. And here's kind of what our view of some of these things are. Is that a fair way to look at it?
That's a great way to look at it. And also, we're lucky to have you share all the hot issues you see, because I think this will give you a good feeling of what other companies are struggling with right now.
If there's one, there's 100.
That's right.
Now, you looked through it and you
Yeah.
commented. There's some touchy subjects here.
This is extremely touchy. I think we're going to be talking about what's typically considered the do not talk about topics.
All right, so we're not going to get to all these because there's 25 questions here.
Yeah.
We don't have that much time. As you looked through this, was there one that you were like, oh man, we got to tiptoe around this, because we're not going to tiptoe around it. You and I both know that.
That's right.
But is there one that you're like, boy, we got to really address this one?
Yeah, the hottest issue to me right now is the balance between protecting religious views and protecting other protected rights, whether it's sexual orientation, gender identity, and if you're forced to take either viewpoint, what are the legalities and issues to be aware of?
So this was question number 6 that I think you're referring
Yes.
to. Let me read the question. I happen to know this individual. Again, I'm not going to use this individual's name, but I do happen to know this individual. And this is what he asked. I happen to be a Christian, and although I love all, I also disagree with certain lifestyles. Okay, we're already getting into deep water here. I don't discriminate as I have many I don't agree with on my team, but I feel scared to speak out about my beliefs and worry I'll be called a bigot or a homophobe. I mean, we're talking some pretty serious stuff here. Can I be sued for my position if I talk about it? Why does it seem like my values are attacked but other opinions are not? That is
Deep, powerful.
not even deep and powerful, but like we're opening Pandora's box here.
There's Pandora's box. So I've actually handled these lawsuits before. So Ford Motor Company just celebrated their 25th year of having an all-inclusive workplace. And they have a blog. And somebody on that blog posted "All gay people die."
Ouch.
Ouch. And given that response, the HR director terminated that employee.
Okay.
That employee then sued and was backed by a nonprofit Christian organization out of Texas.
Okay.
And sued for discriminating based on sharing Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
And if you're posting something on a blog, he thought his response was invited. That's what a blog is for.
It's more personal
More
conversation than
It's a
anything
personal
else.
conversation.
Yeah.
So the argument to justify the termination is that hate speech is not protected. And, once this employee was interviewed, he said he was not intending hate speech, and it was not hate speech because he just meant the science behind of being unable to reproduce.
Got it.
And this case ultimately settled for an undisclosed amount that we can't get into, but that just shows you that even if you make other people feel uncomfortable, you could still be exposed to a claim.
So let's talk about that a little bit here, and not just from the legal perspective, but kind of from the business and operational perspective here
Right.
for a second. So if let's just use my team. If I had some people on my team that were really passionate about whether it's BLM or something else, and they continue to talk about it,
Yep.
and I come into the room and I talk about whatever my faith is at that particular time, where does the line cross, or do we know where the line is to become, well, you're trying to put your views on me, now I feel uncomfortable? Well, the other side, if they do it, and this is what he's referring to, because I know the story behind the question
Sure.
actually, is, well, that side can do it, but I'm afraid to do it because Christian views are looked at a little bit differently than some of these other views. I mean, it's a hard topic.
It's a very hard topic, and I think as employers and HR, we need to realize that any sincerely held religious belief has legal protections regardless if you agree with it or not.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that you're evaluating the best way to accommodate that religious belief. And I do think there's an appropriate time and place to share your thoughts. And if it's welcomed in the workplace or asked of you, that would be an appropriate place. But if your company has a certain brand or image that it's trying to portray, and you are acting like you don't support their vision and their brand, that's where it can become work-related. But they still can't limit you from sharing and having your own beliefs.
Yeah, everybody's entitled to believe what
That's right.
that person wants to believe, but it does get gray when people are taking to offense now, it seems. And there's some other questions around this, right, or comments around
There are.
the whole cancel culture thing, where if I don't believe, whether you're a Christian, a Muslim, or something else, and I don't believe, I want to shut you down.
Right.
Instead of, okay, you believe what you believe, and this is why I believe what I believe, and now let's go have lunch. It just doesn't seem like that's happening anymore, which is referred to in one of the other comments.
It's a major issue. I think part of it is that there wasn't the leadership training of how to appropriately interact with your colleagues. And I think people are more, saying they're right and not inquiring or asking the right question to understand someone's perspective, because in certain scenarios, both people can be right.
Yeah.
And I think that, and the talk is not, as we went over yesterday, is there's no free speech in the workplace for a private company.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a couple of times because the questions kept coming up about that particular issue.
Yeah.
That's not covered.
Right.
I can fire anybody on my team really for any reason because of the way the state laws are.
Yeah.
But if I don't like what you say, I can fire you. And there's no technical repercussions. There could be.
Well, anyone can sue for frivolous things, but there shouldn't be any repercussions for that. What was fascinating is I spoke to the in-house attorney of General Motors, and they had a policy of no politics in the workplace, no LGBTQ shirts, no BLM shirts, nothing.
Really?
But then they changed their policy and are only allowing BLM and nothing else. And I said, why are you supporting just one and not, how'd you make this decision? And they were worried about the culture, and there could be violence in the workplace, and it could create more damage by doing nothing than allowing it, as long as it was appropriate BLM dress code.
So now we're approving the singling out of one group, one movement, one organization, and potentially doing that to the detriment of all the other groups, all the organizations. To me, James, that doesn't make sense
Right.
to be able to do that or to even want to be able to do that.
To me, it doesn't make sense from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
I think they must have understood, potential striking workers and how it would be interpreted in the workplace and made that executive decision. Maybe we should have an in-house attorney on to share that logic.
In fact, I think that would be incredible. So whether it's GM or anybody else, if you're watching this or somebody sends this to you and you want to talk about how you came across, whether it's just supporting BLM or just supporting this group or just supporting that group, that just seems to me to open up a whole nother can of worms.
Right.
Maybe not legally, but ethically, if we're going to be diverse and support inclusion, doesn't that mean, at least to me, I'm a simple guy.
Yeah, right.
That means everybody, not a group.
I understand that logic as well. So I find it fascinating how these decisions are being made. I'm also hearing unique issues that I don't always think about is I guess people are writing more statements and comments in urinals than ever before in the bathroom stall. Maybe.
What?
I guess it goes back to, it always goes back to the bathroom somehow, it seems to be. But I think at these largely populated companies, it's harder to know who the troublemaker is, if you want to call that person that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother issue. How do you solve the problem if you have no idea who's causing
the problem? So you said something earlier that I want to tie into this. You said, sometimes leaders aren't being trained to deal with some of this stuff.
Right.
And I think that's important because if you don't cut it off, or let's take a look at it a different way. Let's say we select one of these groups to support. What's the potential impact as you go down the chain within the organization of people that may or may not support that particular group? And what's the leader supposed to do to deal with that issue? Because that's a morale killer in many organizations.
100%. So you and I would be in agreement on the leadership and the importance of training. I think that some leaders don't take the time to understand the 360 view of how they're perceived. The leader thinks in their own mind they're great and they know what they're doing, and maybe they do, but if there's a perception of not being trusted by your team and essentially ignoring your team members' viewpoint and ideas and solely finding negative statements to call them out on and not including them as part of the brain trust and reinforcing positive reinforcement,
Yeah.
I think your culture could be destroyed. And if they think the leader is so, one-sided in their viewpoint, they're going to feel uncomfortable ever sharing a different viewpoint.
Yeah, and whatever that potential viewpoint is, and
That's right.
That is one of the caveats of a leader. If you want to have go back to, because it's a popular thing to talk about, and it's important, the diversity and inclusion conversation. Yeah. If you want to have diversity and inclusion, you've got to be willing to open it up to all backgrounds, all interests, all everything, and have that conversation that you're okay with that. You don't have to agree with it.
Right. You should welcome a different perspective and different style because that'll at least make you play devil's advocate and make you more aware of your position.
And and we talked a little bit about this last month as well, but it seems that, again, it'd be better to say, James, you and I don't disagree. I'm going to ostracize you. You're wrong. Forget it. Instead of having the conversation, Terry uses the term. He's on his way, actually.
Oh, great.
Terry uses the term, we need to have a more proactive social discourse. This is the term that he uses all the time. And it's like, and I can guarantee you the three of us won't agree on everything.
100%.
And that's okay. And we don't mind. But most people, or at least we're willing to have the conversation around, okay, what's the lens that you look at it? Why do you believe what you believe? You have a legal background. You're going to see things completely different than me that doesn't have a legal background.
I think you said it, the right key word is viewing it from a different lens and understanding our viewpoint, where I think a lot of leaders go wrong by saying, you're wrong.
Yeah.
This is how it is. And if you do that, your team isn't going to trust you when they are confident in their beliefs that they're right.
That's right.
So instead, I would say, I feel this way, which is the truth. Someone's feelings can't really be disputed.
Based on my experience, based
Right.
on what I know, this is the viewpoint that I'm going to take.
That's right.
And I haven't lived in your shoes So I have no idea what the viewpoint is that you're going to take, but I can ask questions about it.
That's right.
Why do you believe that? Why do you have that view? But be careful, I would say, not to knock it, uncover, but don't make a judgment call on it.
And that's why I'm seeing the safer approach is a new style, or at least it's somewhat newer, asking questions more as a leader. Yeah. Why are you doing it this way? Why do you, as opposed to just dictating the end result?
Well, now you're opening a whole nother conversation. Yeah. There was the session that you and I were both talking at yesterday. Yes. was kind of that whole idea. Leadership has never been around dictating. The reason that we get caught up into that is our organizations, the organizational structures have been modeled off the military. General at the top is the thinker.
Yeah.
The officers in the middle are the teller, and the people that are doing the work are the doers. And the information flows from the top to the bottom. That doesn't work in business. It never has. It was adopted from the Roman military. That's where that model comes from.
Yeah.
Right, in the 1900s, businesses started getting bigger. They had to put structure. The problem is it creates that dictatorial kind of thing. That is, and good leaders know that's not the role. Good leaders know. To your point, you named it perfectly. Good leadership is about asking questions. Good leadership is about influence. You can't have influence on somebody if you don't understand what makes them tick. If you don't understand their viewpoints.
I like to go back to sports, and I think about what's a good coach, and a good coach is also accountable for their team and doesn't just call out, the one person in front of everybody.
No, and actually, there's the one thing about sports. Since you brought it up, you have this team shared fate. In business, the way we handle a lot of things, we no longer have a team shared fate. So think about that for a second. Think about your best team that you were ever on in college or high school.
Yeah.
Shared fate on everything. What happens when we get into the workplace? It's no longer a shared fate.
No,
it's team goals, not a shared fate. So that's for a different topic because we've
that'd be a great full hour, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you a couple of others just to get your perspective on this, because again we can go on to this one forever, but these are related. So another one of the comments that we received, this actually came in about 2 weeks ago. I see companies jumping on hiring chief diversity officers, but they all seem to be people of color. Do you have to be a person of color to be passionate about diversity? Isn't that making assumptions about those of another race?
I totally understand that comment, and I've felt, even though I specialize in diversity and inclusion training, I feel that I'm getting less of those training sessions because of that bias that people have, that they have to fill a quota.
Because you're a white guy.
Because I'm a white guy. And I think that is the wrong way to look at it, especially because as a white male, I can disclose the unconscious biases that I've had along my life and disclose how a majority of your workforce probably is viewing diversity and inclusion right now and speak from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So I don't think you should solely make decisions based on race.
You actually bring up a good point. If all chief diversity officers are somebody non-white male, but yet a lot of the organization happens to be a white male, white female, and so forth, how are they going to relate to that person and what's going on? I'm not saying they can't be a minority or a person of color, but I don't know that we should be discriminated against as a result of that. I did a session with one of the HR associations.
Right.
This is a couple years ago in Chicago, and it was on diversity, and it was billed as a diversity comment. And I walk out on stage, and everybody's just kind of looking at me, and I look behind myself kind of as a joke, and I say, "Yeah, I'm the white guy who's going to introduce the non-white guy." Just kidding, right?
You're right.
Because it was like, what's the white guy doing talking about diversity? And I don't want to minimize it. I think you got to have whoever's the best fit and passionate about it. Because I agree with you. I mean, I don't have a perfect past in terms of my view of diversity.
Sure.
I've viewed it differently till I got to college.
Right.
And then in college, I realized we're all the same but different. We're all equal but different.
Yep.
Really is what it came down to. A lot of people are feeling that.
They are. I think that what I'm seeing as the best training is to have, a black person, a white person, and maybe males and females, like a diverse panel like us, so you can have some dialogue where it isn't just one view dictating and that's all. That's the only solution.
Yeah.
because I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all solution.
No, again, we just talked about it. Everybody's looking at it from a different lens.
Right.
So if we come in with a one-size-fits-all, you are bound to alienate somebody and potentially a really large group of people.
That's right.
No matter which way you go. All white would be wrong. All people of color would be wrong.
That's right.
But I thought that was an interesting observation. And these are topics people are talking about kind of behind closed doors and they're messaging each other about, but nobody wants to bring this
And
stuff
that's true.
up.
And I think, Steve and I touched upon it on a different session, is quotas are illegal.
Yeah, you talked about
And
that.
so a lot of employers, when they think, okay, I got to have my next hire be this race or this gender, that is not legal. And I think, too, if we're all of a sudden solely speaking up on one hot, public issue, we have to look back. Did we take any position on the Me Too movement? Did we take any position on, LGBTQ, BLM?
Me Too's like done. Where'd it go?
That's, according to the news, it kind of is. However, I love the question that came in here is, are any of these movements setting anyone back?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that for a second. So whether it be, what was there was a couple of them that were kind of.
There were a couple related to that.
But it was something to the effect of, okay, you've got the BLM movement, Me Too, which isn't
Right.
even indicated in here, and to be honest with you, I kind of forgot about.
Yep.
Hate to say it.
Yep.
Or any of these other things. Is the movement itself, will it go away and potentially hurt that group or other groups? And to your point, could it set somebody back?
Yes, it could set somebody back, and in some organizations, it already has. I've heard from several clients and talking to other colleagues that, they're uncomfortable now being alone in an office with the opposite sex, or driving somebody home that may have had too many cocktails at a networking event.
Potential accusation.
Potential, it's just a perception or accusation, or even going out to lunch too frequently with someone that, there could be an issue. So I think that it's more sensitive than ever. I think, so now a lot of those executives don't want to mentor someone of the opposite sex on their team. They're less likely to give that one-on-one attention and would rather be in a group setting with another witness there because of that fear.
So I think it's even going further than that. And this is
Sure.
So here's one of the comments, and then I'll give you a scenario.
Yeah.
Is the BLM movement actually causing any positive change in the workplace? To me, it just seems like lighting more fires in companies and creating more dissension and separation between the races. The problem is that it's becoming a distraction in our company and reducing results. Can I rule out these discussions? You can say no political discussion because you've kind of talked.
You can say no political discussions, but that question is much deeper.
It is.
And I think that the answer is it depends on the leadership.
Yeah.
Some leadership could use this as an opportunity to improve communication. Others make it more polarizing.
The story that I was going to relate back. I had a conversation yesterday on my way back from the event that you and I had up north, and there was an individual that was thinking about hiring another individual, who they both happen to be minorities. They both happen to be people of color, and the leader looked at the individual's Facebook page, which is public. It wasn't private. It was public, and the individual is very involved in some of the protests that are going on. Very qualified individual. But his comment to me yesterday was, I don't want to bring that into my office because we don't have any problems right now. I don't think I can hire that person. Is that potentially happening? If it's happening once, legally, what's kind of the recourse behind it? And then secondly, could that be a bigger problem where people are saying, I'm not going to hire somebody because I don't want to bring it in my office? For whether it's BLM or anything else.
No, the answer is yes. I actually am getting a lot of business owners and executives saying, I don't want to hire someone that's too active on social media. Their brand is not necessarily my brand.
That's one of the issues.
And depending if they're in a leadership position, even if they don't disclaim this is not on behalf of my company, and you're a leader, it's going to be perceived to be on behalf of your company.
Yeah, sure.
And your LinkedIn profile, your Facebook often says where you work, or people quickly look you up and find out where you work.
Yeah.
And, I watched the Michael Jordan documentary, and Michael Jordan back in the day when he was active, the most active selling shoes, didn't want to take a position either way because he goes Republicans and Democrats both buy shoes.
Yeah.
So I think it does have a bottom line business result based on someone's private social media activity.
Okay, so the leader's name is Todd. So if you were going to give Todd legal advice based on what I just told you, what's the specific legal advice you'd give to Todd?
Your personal brand impacts the workplace brand. They're buying your personal brand too. And I think that you need leadership training to have a full perspective of how you're always representing the company, whether you're at work or not at work, and how is your conduct helping continue to grow that employer's brand. And I think that if you are taking positions outside of that brand, there should be a discussion to minimize the impact to that brand.
Okay. And if I'm deciding not to hire somebody because of that, legal recourse?
So I've seen creative arguments, right? So
That's why I'm asking.
I think that it's rare for an employer to say, I'm solely not hiring you because of your commitment to BLM and protest. That would be a very damaging statement for someone to say. That could go on the news and be
From
interpreted.
From that perspective, it'd kill you.
It would kill you.
Yeah.
So I think typically in reality, someone would pick someone else and probably not get into the details as to that being the sole reason for it not working out. And potentially if someone is trying to improve working conditions, that could be protected speech under the National Labor Relations Act if they're beneath a supervisor, like a lower level worker.
So the hiring leader is an SVP. The individual he was considering to hire would be like an AVP, VP level.
Okay, so that probably don't have National Labor Relations Act rights. But still, I think that, if other employees learn that you're against supporting anyone that is active in that movement, that could hurt morale with your other employees and your customer base. I think a lot of this, there is a legal argument to it. People will say that they're solely making that decision based on race. And if they were a white person supporting All Lives Matter, would you have made the same decision? And hopefully if your answer was yes, you don't want anyone that's too active on the media, that would be a more neutral decision.
Yeah, these are tough. I think Terry's here.
All right.
Because I noticed that our camera guy has snuck out underneath the camera, so we're going to see if
Well,
Terry...
I think we should open up with that question back at Terry and see how he responds. Let's give him the hardball right away.
On this, you know what? I think that's probably a good idea. We'll give him a second to get in here. So, but I want to bring up a couple of others while we're thinking or waiting for Terry, especially because there's legal implications for some of these. I have employees claiming to have COVID. We talked about this yesterday.
We did.
I have employees claiming to have COVID and asking to pay for 80 hours of sick leave, which is the typical sick. Terry,
what's up?
How you doing, man?
Today?
We're doing this.
Sorry, fellas.
That's okay.
Sorry.
So Terry Bean has joined us. I did tell everybody that you sent me an email. I didn't say what you said in the email.
Oh, it was very clear what I said. It didn't have any exclamation points, but it definitely had some expletives.
You know what? This is what happens when you're used to just working 100% remote, and then I ask you to come into an office, socially distanced for a little bit of time.
Threw me off, man. I'm like, where's the Zoom link? In Livonia? Wait a second.
So the reason we're not doing the Zoom link is because we're also simulcasting live on LinkedIn Live. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube.
We're doing the things.
We're doing everything.
I love it.
So did you get the questions I sent you?
I didn't want to look at the questions because I would have had premeditated
Natural
answers.
response.
That's right. I didn't want to be like, ooh, this is how I'd answer that. I want to be surprised.
Okay, so let's give you some background. James and I have been doing this for a number of months now, right? And every time we have one of these discussions, we go back out to the audience and say, send us questions, comments, and so on.
Smart.
And the idea was to deal with some of the issues that are like major issues that people don't want to talk about kind of in public.
Pressing, happening now, right? I like it.
Because all this stuff is impacting. So every month, they've gotten a little more colorful. They've gotten a little bit more oh crap kind of questions,
true.
which is why we like it. So here's the question that I was just asking James. That situation, I got a call yesterday from a senior VP, a client of mine, and he's trying to decide, do I hire this individual or do I not hire this individual? And the reason he's worried about it is he went on that individual's public Facebook page. Now he happens to be an African American, the hiring leader. The candidate happens to be African American. Okay. So we know BLM is a big deal right now.
Certainly.
And the candidate is very active in the BLM movement, and there was a lot of things on his Facebook page that brought the guy caution, the hiring leader, who happens to be also African American, as I said. And his concern was, we don't have any issues within the office. I don't want to bring that issue into the office. So I was asking James about the legal implications of that. Mm-hmm. But there's the people implication.
The culture side of it.
What's your thought on that?
So I don't know what the legal implication is because I was late. I don't know if you guys heard that or not. But on the off chance, I have some cultural thoughts. Right?
Okay.
You can really change the energy of an environment when somebody comes in and takes a whole different perspective. Now, I don't know what the rest of their office looks like. I don't know how they feel about it. I don't know what their policies, or even if they have policies in place around this. But you don't really want to go around upsetting the apple cart. Now, simultaneously, can you have a conversation with this guy and say, listen, we don't care what you do outside of the office, but we have really strict ideas about how we behave inside. Can you be a part of our culture without disrupting it? Or is this going to be pervasive inside of your description?
So, yes, but James brings up a good point on this. If you represent something that as an organization could cause us a disagreement on, by extension, your profile could be reflected upon my brand. That's kind of what we talked about.
That's right.
What about the implications of that from kind of a cultural, personal perspective?
Yeah, so you're known by the company you keep,
Yeah.
100%, right? So listen, there are plenty of groups right now that are trying to figure out how to be more supportive of that movement. And if this company's in that vein, then this is a great opportunity to get somebody that's out there and in front of it. If this company's against it, again, it's going to create some sort of friction. And honestly, as a hiring manager, I think it's your role to make sure that you're bringing people in that fit, not bringing people in that are going to upset the apple cart.
Well, can we go off on that
Let's
tangent
just keep
for a
it going.
second? Because there's something about culture fit that we all talk about. I think
Yeah.
every one of us have probably said they're a culture fit or they're not a culture fit. What about the difference between culture fit and culture add? So this is why I asked the question. If my culture it's not the case in this organization, was we're all a bunch of middle-aged white bald guys, which we are not, by the way. Okay.
Partially.
But because
Baldine in this room.
but because it's the friends that we keep, it's the culture that we keep, and I continue to get people that fit in my culture, I'm going to lose the opportunity to bring diversity into my culture. So is really culture fit what we want, or is culture add what we want?
I'm a big fan of continuous improvement, right? And if again, it's gotta line up with the mission and the vision of the organization. Period. Once you start getting outside of that, it's not gonna work, right? It starts fracturing many different areas. To your point though, if it's an improvement, you gotta go with it. If it's gonna make it better, right? If you're gonna start looking at things from a different perspective, if you're gonna start being able to relate with your clients better, if you're gonna start relating with your business partners better, if you're gonna relate more with your employees who have been too quiet about something because they want eggshell type stuff, and this guy's gonna come in and upset that apple cart, that can happen in a good way.
Sure.
Right? So
I'm
I
the
like
same
it.
viewpoint. I think that you got to make sure that depends on what the social media content is. I've seen some people say, only vote for women, no one else. Whoever's on the ballot, just women. And can I have them in a leadership position knowing they're already perceived as disfavoring people equally? And same thing on the BLM. If they're saying, only hire minorities, never hire a white male again, or all white males are bad, I can't have that in my workplace either. But if their content is more, I believe we should all focus on our strengths and not have any bias against us that isn't business related, I support that.
What's the potential long-term effects of that in the workplace, though, right? So think about it. I'm only going to hire a female. What does that say internally to the organization?
You check in your, oh crap, I got one of those things. It's not gonna work.
I'm not going to last here.
Yeah, right? It's gonna change. So you gotta be mindful of that.
Yeah.
It sets the tone in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, we talk about let's hire the best person for the job, but yet
Right.
then we go out there and say, I'm just going to hire this or I'm just going to hire this. I think it causes a lot of dissension within the organization when a leader comes out and says, can only look at the business that I've been in and you've been in previously. You get a lot. Well, you even get these where it's like, I need a African American female HR leader. I think you actually brought that example up this past week.
Yep.
Really? You don't want the best person? You need doesn't mean that they're not the best
That's
person.
right.
But that doesn't make any sense to me.
I appreciate the honesty and the candor in that statement, right?
Sure.
As opposed to the lip service to the best person for the job.
But I really just want the African American.
100%.
But from a legal standpoint, I can't appreciate that honesty because quotas are illegal, and to say you want to hire solely based on that criteria is exposing that company a liability when there's a qualified different race or gender candidate that gets denied solely for their birth, their being a male, female, or a certain race.
Yeah.
So appreciating the honesty, but what's the problem with that honesty?
Well, I think he just outlined it.
Aside from the legal side.
Right?
Right.
What's the problem? Well, you change the tone, right? You start having people look around. If you're saying it for this particular role, I think that's a little different than we're only hiring females, or we're only hiring African Americans, or Native American fellows that are balding like myself, right? That's what we're looking at.
But we can't. None of those are technically legal, though.
You can never make a decision based on race.
Period.
Or age, or sex, or what?
Those are all protected classes. So that's a good reminder for the audience. So it gets pretty expansive in Michigan. Height, weight, marital status, family status,
Sexual orientation,
gender identity, misdemeanor arrest
color.
record, religion. And I'm also seeing, like, regarding leadership, I have one client that believes in Scientology. And he is a huge fan of the Hubbard training, regardless of your religion. He believes that training makes a profitable organization. So he's adamant. I don't know all the ins and outs of that training, but he's adamant about rolling it out at the company. And do these employees feel pressure to adopt a religion, or is it just a way of thinking and a perspective of leadership?
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Because, So, John Maxwell, you know who John Maxwell is?
Yeah.
Pastor turned leader person. I think he's fabulous when it comes to some of his leadership training stuff. But he doesn't hide the fact that he used to be a pastor and he's a Christian and so on. Could that be construed as I'm trying to push my religion on my team because I'm using some of his material to train leaders?
It could be construed that way, and I'm seeing there's a lawsuit in Florida on the Scientology case I mentioned pending still. So the response to that is, what I would do is I would roll out this training, but say if for some reason you have a sincerely held religious belief that prohibits you from going through this training, we'll offer an alternative training.
Got it. Okay.
Can't make it mandatory, make it optional kind
That's
of deal?
right. Yep.
It's fascinating that you bring up the Scientology piece, because the origin of Scientology comes from the same origin that Tony Robbins does all his stuff. There's a group called EST way back in the day that put all that information out. It's the same as, what's the group around here? Landmark Forum. Right?
Really?
So those entities all came from this ESTE origin, and the knowledge inside of it is basically source wisdom, right? It drives right back down to what some people believe we all came from. So it's fascinating that you can put it in a religious context, but you could also put it in a life well lived context too.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we all are kind of acting based on our experiences, since childhood, and I think we have to figure out how to allow our viewpoints to be shared without always tying it to something illegal.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So there was a couple of legal questions that I wanted to bring up, but then there's also kind of the people side of it that I think we can still approach these. In fact, let me go back to one that I started to talk about before you walked in, because I need to get your opinion on it. So here was the question again. I have employees claiming to have COVID and asking them to be paid for 80 hours of sick leave with that, whatever the law is right now, about 80 hours. As a small business, what do I do? Can I make them prove that they have COVID with HIPAA laws? What's the mental impact of saying we don't trust them? That's kind of the secondary piece.
Sure. So on the first piece, there's the Family First Coronavirus Response Act that is in effect until the end of this year. And that allows any company that has 500 or less employees to pay up to 80 hours of paid sick leave for COVID symptoms and get reimbursed through payroll. So if you're in that size, 1 to 500, in order to get that payroll tax write-off, you would have to show that that employee is seeking a medical diagnosis.
So that allows me as an employer to get reimbursed for that 80 hours from the government.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yep. So the employee can't just say, I have symptoms, sniff, sniff, I'm going on a 2-week paid vacation. They would actually have to say not only do they have symptoms, but they're also seeking a medical diagnosis.
Okay.
And as far as saying, show me the test, you can't do that on the front end, but you can do it on the back end. You can't return to work until I have a clearance from your doctor
They no longer have it.
that they no longer have it.
Okay. So asking for that, I mean, think about it from the kind of the employee-employer relationship there. Should you ask for it just from that perspective? I'm not even talking the legal side that James just mentioned. What do you think?
I think if you've got the right in relationship with your employees, right? If you came to one of your employees and said, "Yo, yeah, I want to let you go, but honestly, I don't want this money coming out of my pocket," right? There's this way that I can get this money reimbursed. All I need to do is have some proof. It's not that I don't trust you. I'm just trying to cover my ass and my assets, right?
Right.
So I think you can actually ask that and have that conversation that way. And if your employees care about the business and the success of it and the future of their job,
Right.
they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that makes total sense." Now, I guess it all depends on the level of employee that you're looking at
Sure.
too, right? But yeah, you got to, in that scenario, you got to ask because you need that kind of proof.
Can you ask like that legally?
Ah.
Well,
I get that from, and in fact, my natural inclination would be to do just that. And I haven't had that situation, but I would say, hey, here's the deal, knowing that I can get reimbursed. But can I legally?
legally you can, and that's the smart way to do it. So legally, if you share a business reason for your inquiry, that's a legitimate, non-discriminatory way to do it. So for example, another business, I don't just look at the fact pattern in front of me. I think you keep on saying, Terry, look at the culture. When other people had 3 sick days or more, did you ask for a doctor's note for them for other sicknesses? If someone is pregnant, you make them prove to you they're pregnant. How are you handling other circumstances? And
Consistency.
especially if it's in a same position, are you only singling out a certain race or gender? How are you doing that? Or a certain age, how are you treating everybody equally? And a neutral reason would be my handbook policy says, if you're missing more than this many days of work, I need a doctor's note clearing you to come back.
That makes sense. All right, let me switch. I want to go away from the legal side, but I know you got perspectives on both.
Sure.
But ask you this one because you've worked from home for a long time, like forever.
Yeah, better part of 20 years.
Okay, so here's one of the comments or questions. Our teams are all remote, and I'm okay with that. But many seem to be struggling with being alone. Any suggestions on how to better engage the team?
So, I mean, the obvious thing is do some video chat and get people connected, right? Encourage some sort of interaction and then figure out a way to have people just communicate. But the reality is you have to let people kind of set their own schedule, right? The beautiful thing about working from home is instead of having the office hours of 8 to 6, now you have office hours potential from wake up to go to bed. Right? And so if you can allow people flex time in their day so they don't feel like going mad during a certain period of time and allow them to kind of choose and pick when they're going to do their work or when they're going to load the dishwasher or when they're going to walk the dog or when they're going to call that client back, it makes for a little more control. It makes for a little easier time for them. And it allows them to feel like they're a part of something still.
What about in the situation where, because I happen to know this person too, because she sent this to me directly, financial services, it's kind of a customer. You got to be online this time to this time, because that's what our customers expect.
That's when the stock market's open.
That's right. Well, and it's kind of ancillary to that,
Right.
is what it is. So they're not going to have that ability to kind of get up, put the dishwasher on, turn it on, and so on. What do you do in that situation? Because I think that's where the bigger problem is. Us, professionally, we can kind of do what we want to do. We all know that. And I love the suggestion because I agree with it. But what do you do in these situations, which a lot of the folks are out there now? I got to work. I still have to work 8 to 5 because we're 7 to 3.
Right.
Because that's the stock market.
Or the time to the time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. At that point, you just got to trust that they're doing it, right? And then you got to give them some extra strokes, right? And whatever that looks like for them. The challenge, I think, is we do this cookie cutter reward system, but we're not cookie cutter people, right? So we have to get into the heads of the folks that we're really trying to support and do it in a way that meets their needs as opposed to meets our needs. And I feel like that's one of the challenges that companies face.
So when you go deep, a little deeper into that for a second, the cookie cutter reward system, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is we try and pat people on the back the same way.
Oh, got
Right,
it.
and I don't know if you've got a loyalty program inside of your company. I don't know if you're, what you're actually offering to keep people engaged and exciting. I think about outside of business. I think about teachers right now, right? And we're all kind of going through something very similar. Our workload has gotten bigger and greater. our time has expanded, right? And they always say work fills or expands to fill the time allotted. But our benefit and our bonus from doing it doesn't exist. So I think we got to figure out a way to do that, to go a little bit above and beyond for the people that are going above and beyond for us.
Everybody's driven by something different. You guys are all remote, or you were?
We are all remote. What's kind of shocking is Governor Whitmer, not to get too into politics, but the executive order doesn't consider lawyers to be an essential service or financial.
I've been telling you that for.
Not in Michigan, in Ohio and other
Said that like you were surprised,
right?
Wait
I was
a
like,
second.
what? So technically, you can only come back to the office if it's necessary to get the work done or to have a certain level of quality or to maintain operations.
Yeah.
So we're taking the position that, for certain staff that can't access the big printer and do certain things, come in part-time here and there and still have that. We also think it's essential to interact with your peers, to learn each other's styles, have that team bonding, and also you're giving them work and training them, mentoring them more than you would if they don't get to shadow you throughout the day.
Okay, you just described a loophole. With that loophole, literally, if one of my teams said, I need to come in because we have that big color printer there and I don't have one at home, technically they could come in?
So there's a lot of companies are interpreting it that way.
Yeah.
There isn't like case law already out there that says that vision is automatically right or that vision is automatically wrong. It's very fact specific.
Okay.
But I would say that I'm seeing, even through surveys, I would say as high as 50% of law firms specifically are having return to work policies and procedures in place where the people have already back in the office. And I think in a lot of other industries, it's similar, especially if you are interfacing with clients or interfacing with your team. I don't think you can do it quite as effectively most of the time remotely.
Can we go back to a topic, because I keep getting pinged about it, that you and I talked about, but I want to get your thoughts on this, because it has to do with diversity again. Mm-hmm. James and I were talking about, one of the questions was, it seems like everybody's on this bandwagon to hire a chief diversity officer now. And it just so happens that most of those chief diversity officers happen to be African American. We see that, or some other minority.
Sure.
Right? Is that really the right thing to do? Does it exclude? Now I know you're Native American, right?
Mm-hmm.
But does it exclude us? Bald-headed, middle-aged white guy, still has hair, middle-aged white guy, and a middle-aged, almost bald-headed.
Well on his way.
So, I mean, what's kind of your philosophical thoughts about that?
I don't think you can fully understand the nature of diversity and the importance of diversity as someone that has very little diversity, right? So, like, intuitively, it would make sense that it would be easier for an African American person to head up a minority person to head up a diversity campaign or office or practice, because they're going to have a certain level of sensitivity to it that is real and just, right? Not like social justice warriors who are 23-year-old white guys that are running around saying we need more diversity. That's a reaction, right? That's not like prima facie. That's not at the very beginning. That's not the cause, right? Or the effect in that scenario. So I think it's important that you have somebody that's lived it firsthand as opposed to hasn't. Now, does that mean that companies need to have this? Honestly, at some point we have to get to a point where we're having these conversations enough where one side's being heard, right, and feels like they've been heard. The other side's actually listening and doing something that understands. And then I feel like we can have this communicative, holy crap, that sucked. I can't believe that's where we've been for this many decades, this many centuries. We're all sorry. Here's our mistake. There's your mistake. And then we just have to have this quantum leap and get past it. But I don't think we can get past it until we have those conversations.
So let me bring up the topic related that you and I were talking to. So I get having some sensitivity. But let's think about if there's an issue within that organization, it's because there's a bunch of white people there. That's really what it's coming down to. And you're trying to change the behavior of a large population. And if you don't understand the behaviors and why they have that perspective, does it mean that me as a middle-aged white guy can't go and talk about diversity and teach people about diversity? I've never been African American. I've never been any other person, a minority. But I know what I've felt. I know what I've gone through, and I know what the majority have gone through. Can't I just be just as effective?
No, you can't, because you said you know, but you don't know, right? You think you know, and there's a big difference between I think I know what it's like to have to make a decision on having an abortion, but you know what I've never really had to do is make a decision on whether or not to have an abortion, because I'm not equipped to do it. So I can think I know. I can't really know. And I think I think it might be nuanced, but it's also different.
Yeah, I look at it, I mean, James, I don't know if you want to jump in here, because I look at it a little bit differently. I think there's value to having some level of diversity there, but I don't know that everybody who's running a diversity program needs to be only a person of color. I think that there's some really great white males and white females who embrace it, who understand it, and are actually doing this really great work to get the majority of the rest of that organization to begin to become more sensitive, because they understand how they're feeling. It's just like one side doesn't understand the other side, it goes back in reverse.
Yeah, I think we got to be careful not to stereotype and exclude qualified candidates without giving them a chance to explain, what their approach is to diversity. What are their experiences? Maybe they grew up in Detroit in a diverse family and experienced things firsthand and have more experience than a minority that grew up in Beverly Hills and with a silver spoon and doesn't have all of those experiences. So I think that, I find it sometimes entertaining to hear what Howard Stern has to say on the subject when he was bullied as a kid, being the only white guy, I think, in the school. Jewish white guy. I think that there's some impact to that. But I'm a fan of all-inclusive. Why not have both perspectives? And I think it's where we were going, is to have a team approach of different styles and perspectives that would make the training even more impactful.
Well, so to that point, right, maybe it's the challenge is we're trying to have it all encompassed into an individual.
That's right.
Right? And to your point, if we're looking at it, I joke all the time, I have the word harmony tattooed on my arm. Yeah. As far as I know, I don't read Chinese. I think it says harmony. I'm not really sure. Might say this dumb guy has something right now. Sorry. Oh, no. Yeah, let's hope. But if you could bring it from a different perspective, right? In the idea of having a white head of diversity breaks stereotypes, and there's something good about that. And I'm not saying that people can't empathize, because I know there's a lot of empathic people. And empathy, just like intelligence, doesn't see color, right? And so I'm all for the best person getting the job, but it's also you have to look at what you know and then what you think you know, right? And then realize that those are different. And if you come at it from a perspective of, I'm here because I want to serve and because I want to help and because I want to make this better and because I've seen this injustice,
right,
then you could be qualified.
But you raise another kind of highly contested point, is people are saying, I don't see color. And I was on a panel with Dan Russell, and he said, I want you to see my color. I want you to see it and accept me for who I am. And so that's not necessarily the correct viewpoint to have in that position.
And that's a good point, because I'm tired of this, because it's seeing color should not immediately equal bias.
Right.
Okay?
Doesn't have to at all.
You're a darker shade than I am.
Right?
You're a little lighter than I, right? But whether you were African American or something else, we all see color. Let's not avoid the fact that we said this earlier, we're equal but we're different. And it seems like as soon as the differences, I used your term actually, and I gave it back to you. I said, Terry talks always about social discourse. You use that constantly. And it's like when we're different, we're afraid to ask each other about why we're different to create some social discourse. We automatically make assumptions about the other party, and now we're all pissed off at each other, and we're bitching at each other or about each other behind the other person's back, which creates the situation that we have.
It's amazing what happens if we go into a conversation with the intention of understanding, right? As opposed to the intention of, I'm going to spew what I think I know. Right. Listen, man, if 2020 has taught me, Terry Bean, anything, it's I don't know shit. I used to think I was smart, man. I know nothing.
That's well said.
It's right. It's we're stripping stuff away time and time again.
So this is actually why we're having this conversation, because three guys, we need to get some diversity more than just you, okay?
Get the tan guy. He's have him come in.
But the point is that we don't agree on. I knew we wouldn't agree on everything, and that's kind of the intent behind it. But
Right.
to show that we can talk about some of these topics from different points of view, and actually have a conversation about it. And still, if we were socially distanced and went to lunch, it wouldn't be that big of a deal.
At all.
Right.
I think the wiser you get, you realize that there's a lot you don't know, and there's another perspective that you haven't considered. And that's the whole training of a lawyer is what's the plaintiff side and the defense side and the various perspectives. So I'm lucky to have that day-to-day training that tries to help keep that open mind.
I want to bring up one more topic before we're done here, because it affects the remote thing again. There's a legal piece to it and a non-legal piece to it. And let me read both of these together, so to speak. Number one, can I fire an employee that has to stay home because the kids are at home? I need the employee that has to stay home because the kids are at home. I need an employee to come into the office. It's one of these situations.
Right.
The second question that follows that is different person. Our handbook states that in order to work at home, you need a separate place to avoid distractions, just for your home office. One of our employees clearly does not have that, as kids, dogs, family, and other can always be seen and heard. What can I do? What should I do? So kind of two related issues. One, got to have them in the office. They can't because kids are home. Can I fire them?
So the answer is yes, and I'll explain both lines. You can't do it if your sole reason is family status or marital status, because that's illegal. So you can't do it because they have kids, but you can do it on quality assurance and the job. And if because they're having distractions in the background and they're unable to effectively communicate and do their job responsibilities, you're firing them for not performing at as high of a level as your other employees. So it's work-based and nothing to do with children. But even though I say that, I'm a fan of trying to accommodate a situation, regardless if legally you could. I would try to explore, is there something we can do? Can we have you on this webinar at a different time when your children are asleep? Or is there something we can do to have you come in one day a week just to do the interactive stuff isolated? Or can you get potentially other arrangements where you can have some free time? So I want to explore a solution, but it's not illegal to make decisions based on job-related reasons.
Fascinating.
What about kind of the moral piece to this, Terry?
One of the things that I've noticed is the word need in that sentence. I need them to be in the office.
That's exactly what it says.
Right? And I heard you playing. And so I think back a year ago, and what the owners thought about needing to have their people in the office to be able to do something, and what they learned over the middle part of this year, that need kind of shifts a little bit. And I'm not discounting the word need, because they may actually really have a legitimate need. But I like the idea of trying to find solutions, right, and looking at it. But morally, right, what's the rest of the people say? Holy crap, man, I better get my stuff together because we got to let go because this kid was in the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
That seems over the top to me. It does. But if it's performance related, and the reality is most people have dogs barking in Zoom meetings. They have kids pulling on their shorts at the Zoom meeting because no one wears pants anymore, so it's definitely shorts.
Right. A tie and shorts.
Shorts. And so it's probably annoying, and it's probably disruptive, and it's probably distracting. So,
and the risk is, what if there's a male that had their dog bark or a kid make a noise, and you only fired the woman?
Oh.
So you can't. Your fact patterns are all based on this scenario. But what about now? You have a precedent for the rest of the workforce.
Ooh, and heaven forbid it's a black female that got fired first.
Right.
Which Pandora's box.
Yeah.
So we're at 12:01. So we've used our hour. Thank you guys for coming again. James coming again.
Pleasure.
Terry, for making it for at least half. It was worth having you here.
Yes.
For that. But I knew it would be good to have you here just because we've had enough conversations, and again, we're not aligned on everything. The same thing with James, you and I, but I love the legal perspective of stuff. If you guys are watching this and you've got questions, like we only got through about a third of the questions.
I know.
There are so many more, but keep sending them because we'll keep doing this. And if we need to do it more than once a month live, we'll do it more than once a month live. It's not
That's
an
right.
issue.
And we're happy to continue the conversation offline.
Yeah.
So if you have a question that you don't want to wait for our next session to try to approach, text us, email us.
Yeah, and in fact, say your cell phone number again, James.
734-649-1313. And Steve and I are also going to post answers on social media to some of the common questions to give everyone a chance to see them.
Now you're pretty open about contacting you as well,
Sure.
Terry. What's, if you don't mind sharing, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Easiest is this thing right here.
Yep.
248-224-1326.
And mine is 734-837-8500. Text all of us. Text us individually. If you want to remain anonymous, we won't ask you who you are. We'll respond to you. We may take some of that information and have a conversation about it, but we won't attribute it to your
Sure.
specific circumstances. We've hit some pretty significant topics here that I know people are talking about behind closed doors and they just don't want to have frank conversation about, right?
And it's important to do so, right? Otherwise, how do we get to that understanding?
And now we're issue spotting. I think if people spotted the issues, it's a lot easier to find the solution than not even seeing it.
That's exactly it. So we're scheduled just about a month from today
Yep.
to do this again. It's always going to be on a Friday, always going to be at 11 o'clock. We'll make sure that we have the updates posted out there. You can either sign up for it on Zoom or you can just take a look at our LinkedIn Live or on my site on linkedin.com/Steve Lois. You can get a hold of any of us. We can send you the links to it. But again, if you have topics, post them. Send them to us, email us. Everybody have a great weekend. James, again, thank you. Terry, again, thank you. The half hour was worth it. I'm glad you made it here, and it's not that fun.
Thanks for having
The
me.
different viewpoint added to the conversation, right?
The more the merrier. Once we get back to normal, it'd be nice to be maybe in our conference room where there's 6 or 8 of us.
Yeah.
Just talking casually. Maybe even do it over a glass of wine or something like
That'd
that.
be great.
Just to keep making it as real as
At
it's
11.
been.
I like that.
Not at 11 in the morning, though. Unless we're done at noon and we're playing golf.
Or cigars.
There you go.
All right. It's been great to have you. Thanks for joining us on our leadership and legal event. We'll see you 1 month or so from today. Thanks, everybody.
Bye for now.